not hear you. Can you hear?
Yeah.
I can't hear. Is it?
I can, but you can't. Can you repeat what you said? Oh, it just needs to grab the one I see. Mm. She said she's good.
Okay. Maggie, I can't hear you, but I have you pinned, so if like I cut out or whatever, you can just wave your arms. Okay. Advantage when expresses stability paradox, China's inevitable sure retaliation obvious. Nuclear turns and reinforces no first use without encouraging conventional. Aggression or nuclear violence, no expression, no nuclear identity for nuclear. The video BC super validity or also modernization, no legal assumption, no first nuclear retaliation, no laser over major war common ever. Some fear China prefer weapons and theater rather counter argument. Giving operation credible use of everybody the use of the US conventional forces defeated determined conflict against no order to attack. The prevention China nuclear capability, no match with US any. Last believe US attack may hit nuclear acid causing major deadly. Use of digital China protecting the China structure optimism about escalating. Do not believe states would be sufficient nuclear escalation. They see China. The defense was permanent distinction conventional nuclear conflict. The larger Chinese force reinforced major confidence and remaining short of a force. The tenor of nuclear challenge race. Not a nuclear conventional capability versus conventional conflict which China potentially reduction China's stability. This ability permanent use of nuclear by the fate conflict result in changing conventional power use may be forced not nuclear weapons to particularly China's new SSBM deployment means China isn't susceptible to use or lose pressure, but that does risk entanglement fears from the US side. Looking at 23 China, raise concerns to use nuclear conventional strength undermining pressure. The person use or lose pressure as if it were the short ability to use pressure Chinese. The forces you eliminate conventional aggression with a less susceptible US nuclear threats as seen deterrent, particularly self-defense use. And eventually, ESS China is to force escalation versus human suffering. For 6 minutes, period possible to take by the CSS and SS. This is same force overlapping CSC, except for who's to say the China sources giving risk. Conventional conflicts are imminently inevitable. Late India flashpoints clear 1227 breakdown. In the region, trade war clash over Taiwan inevitable. And ever since leading certain greatly that village where conflicts fall. This misstep to neither global identity. This is neither fundamental alteration control issue China trade. And there have been no programs that use the competition with other pressure for constituting military national faction nature trends. The income doesn't China slant toward crisis game momentum China. Arms and loaded Venus has supported including our China. By the faces of major crisis early in 2020 for SC the civil crisis of major fisheries, so war against China, monopolies of future class China vessels and Washington trading partner could easily escalate EU's responsible from training variation class. The current anytime two great powers in conflict would take discipline into how each one of those conflicts is a high risk of escalating only in NFU prevents a US nuclear strike manager. And then 23, we propose a single use for NFU use NFU Russia. Restraining use of nuclear preventing regional stability for escalating the conflict. The vulture territory resource clause and how one SC's China conflict with US patients use one of the company capability. The extra vulnerability to each other where the side that strikes for China. The US space to take a body of one autonomous system could be initially a conflict started war another one is used. Should a war begin escalate rapidly every day to with 20 strikes in the conflict should start very quickly China back the American attack American aircraft or aircraft pieces like nuclear weapons used when China prepare they should launch non-nuclear weapon nuclear then strike first. Conventional conflict ensures American nuclear first use given conventional inferiority Sunni. Then 21 US could contemplate nuclear use for China conflicts not easy for use of operating in proximity or missile defense of China mainly war fighting intimidate access vulnerability conventional attack and the single single carrier led film war fantasy or regulatory public and then cost with superiority China missiles again Japan and Guam US attack operating NPRB US nuclear psychic command by dimension capability subordination forces most system or nuclear non-nuclear relies over IC make like identification with US ships on base and from the whole problem there's a fundamental uncertainty of major escalation from Nolan attack demonstrating said willing to take action vetoes state act rationally not told the non-nuclear is more viable than cold pre-common intention suggests US China nuclear conflict causing station clear in 21 record the forces are boys that target China later preparation use attack agreement to use nuclear collocation result from the word causing each other Billy's make climbing we fire saying that add carbon to the atmosphere China unconditionally hears the NFE that way to use terrestrial detonation for retaliate and any contingency tell us and then 22 China is the first use for controversy especially context of one of the leading highest levels but repeated circulation efforts over and over no first use for less commitment China weapon reasonably China at all much of the first use lyric and guardian has some conventional nuclear and so provide aptly preventing China nuclear creation China deterrent what leaders are human stability expected the sea-based deterrent modernization sees and instructs our relatives Beijing expects deterrent attack-based avoid deposition there must have nuclear operation overwhelming officiality of some after pursuing the attack phase no Chinese free leader ever respond as very confident over this far and then beginning to turn evidence of China with recruitment the best interest vulnerability the pursuit certain the viability even if willing China doesn't have the proportional capability to strike and are only likely to develop them in reaction to US first use to him in 24 China the broader organization leaking conservative sector and the strike the larger number of target force in the over new field they're out of range for control by the first use early warning use of the major the extreme challenge for use to maintain the limitation but there's little left China section direct. After developing first strike to a weapon, it'll strike against you as a little warning. However, there's a first strike. When you develop expansion arsenal, little strike capability. Even if it does a little 1,000 weapon, I can also try to solve yours. Trying to strike against so much ability to eliminate F, trying to sort limit views. Trying to like set theater of TW's motion, not optimize the course and deploy. New option is starts to China's F without restricted. Should if your US implement makes it for like in China extending. It's also affected related to Georgia terms based on secure second striker mad. That's the thing. The United States should adopt a nuclear no first use policy restricting the first use of its nuclear forces against the People's Republic of China. Advantage to its anti-submarine warfare. US declaratory policy locks in US and allied ASW capabilities the tracking Chinese SSBMs in the necessity of pursuit the rejecting mutual vulnerability via damage limitation that trains off the tactical ASW operations out 18 to light the views on allied security for China tracking Washington Public then deploy assets to operation ASW counter SSW attack naturally something directed to purpose summons and MP reference the direct China not good at nuclear capability maintaining escalation and then also the receive conversation part of the relationship and then the factor exchange vulnerability of China SSW the realistic or the US as well US SSW development ASW against China's SSW avoid mutual the China's allies to view China's SSW and its retaliation against regional based situations the China's SSW is equal to public control of the US the Washington is wanting to counter defense and motivate partner the Washington counter China's SSW motivate perception and play after the tracking see China's SSW has a decision not to hold the Chinese SSW responding to play the Russian Chinese SSW specifically a focus on tracking Chinese SSW limits US and allied countering emerging North Korean nuclear submarines that causes crisis escalation and Iranian missile sales versus 20. Despite capabilities to person to record passage China, the expansion of the sea boasts a nuclear structure of American allies, its capacity to use an structural priorities emerging capability, large strategic total window of usage, bolster capability to nuclear threat in Asia, not limited China, and therefore nuclear most likely reach crisis in a short period of time. There's such to be taking nuclear military action surface, should increase president bolstering ASW interests as to be the necessary to protect US allies from missile attack hierarchy. The US should look to ASW improve resource allocation to counter Iran results of transfer to the transfer deep operation order. The Iran interest in territory US interest in the has made a progress on this operation development the highest priority among competing operational requirements of the Pacific associated operational syndrome the operations China but now the Senate back on the program stability breakdown causes Korean nuclear skills global Kelly 23 Senate for nuclear use nuclear first or powerful conventional certain because US and military have recent the kingdoms without the North would lose or using destroy then later would be the best nuclear overseas regime best order from the defense of Korean China to Tona not used to lead national clubs to company etc. In the Senate Washington committed to her allies which determined this one that global responsibility calls for mass retaliation the threat is nuclear alliance exchange chain other players into the conflict, reversing decelerating Iranian proliferation causes. Middle East, where the brink is quick corona, 23 two nations of historic proliferation has been a straight to Iranian relations, continue to ongoing prospects of operate repair demonstration further nuclear falling plantation Iran has not made it to reversing mobilization with the trigger government, the trying conversion bring on the assessment proliferation Syrian facility of cooperation with proximity adversaries, and then assisting breakout states, Middle East, where goes global nuclear every 24 the Iran would be shorter limited individual obvious nature word, escalate general Middle East, Pakistan, enters China, nuclear version, and the China trying to escalate third world nuclear when you see this accident unintentionally coordinated allied ASW deters North Korea a lack of consistently integrated and trained ASW undermines an allied South Korean global blue water force policy 21 if no less competent fire arsenal there in the climate use of RK counter the linear gain no kind of associated program the strike is our RK capability except for the world against limited ability to access capability like RK force modernization contrasting improve the nation ASW the holding is the other American is only ability kind of opportunity this alliance integration also members simply limited effects as a company the ability to respond to ASW from no outside and for RK flexibility and future especially because there's no first expand the influence of global domain versus effectively in a multinational area that solves emerging transnational threats, extinction, and helps the international legal maritime order friendly. That's what these agreements are trying to focus. The safety of democracy side, global nation, for instance, the trade climate mandate with Korea agreement, Department However, the security relax because that's really security use, prevent self-dependence on independence and liberty of blue ordinary force major, the space might escalate associated to that. Regards open interests of the states in order to live in peace, require freedom and global order, sea control, SCS, and trade freedom, sea. No, but I love global capability, able to pursue security, build investment, align US ROK, security co-op should be a prominent part of the stable regional landscape and enforce international legal order solves emerging risk extinction, books number 14 for the species of risk of 70 years of work community, but conflict decline creation of our country state. No less free to use of force of conflict aims global interconnected system, disease pollution and conflict, and the spread quickly biology threats cells and cyber one of the ability to short the earth and our size ability to use it. The planning objectives should be ordered to build some whatever law changes here. The nature of foster stronger system our districts affected. Says we'll need innovative ways to bring actors within the ambit of international law. The plan solves ASW tracking of SSBMs is a necessary component of damage limitation that trades off with conventional operations. And then 20 tracker goes to try and use the stability SSB work operational picture don't mean for nuclear strike SSB force making China listen to use nuclear and the implication for US policy for the operational plan. And they cover these research for trade off conventional and the limiting nuclear spending by limiting ASW. And the Chinese SSB and the Navy will use across the heavily SN and other strategic ASW mission targeting China SSB to conventional military operation and across the targeting China, so force damage limitation, nuclear strike, no deliveries of resources of other mission bank, U.S. attempt to undermine China's strategic deterrent, bilateral NFU solved by force strike, damage limitation against China, AI 21 win, China neutral nuclear strike, China, this for more purposes including deterrent conventional attack use, adoption NFU exclude preemptive nuclear strike, option preemptive strike, necessary, no damage limitation, FPR central U.S. and conflict low double damage use relationship, military, so China nuclear force and China retaliation not credible. Marked I if China's retaliation is not credible.
Okay. Oh,
Somebody told you.
Wait,
Maggie's grabbing a headset right now, so
I can hear it now. Do you want me to cross this off now?
yeah, probably easier. Maggie, can you hear me okay from Jiun's mic?
I think you're gonna have to talk louder.
I want to say she's frozen.
She seems really blurry. Oh, she might be frozen. Oh, no, she's not.
Oh, it's just
Wait,
like.
penetrate.
Was that like really delayed? Wait, you can hear me okay? Okay, sweet. Alright, first question, is the plan declaratory, operational, and goal?
For the questions of substance, it is declaratory.
Okay. Is there ever a world in which it results in operational changes?
There is a world in which the effect of the plan could affect operations. For the context of Advantage 2, it means that we no longer have our submarines in like the first strike posture.
How does the app resolve conventional conflicts emerging?
It doesn't. They're inevitable.
Okay, so let's say a conventional conflict starts between the US and China. The US launches a conventional attack against China, and China's like, oh, they have an NFU, so they're not nuclear, and they're like, we won't escalate?
Well, our argument is that they're conventional clashes now. The clear evidence says that there are already skirmishes at the border. We have boats that'll bump into each other. But in the future, things like an invasion of Taiwan because of electoral pressure or a broader hegemonic interest means that those countries go to war. You are correct that when the US launches a conventional attack, or China does, it no longer goes nuclear because China has an NFU and we figure out the US has one.
Okay. Advantage 2. How does declaratory posture, what about changing declaratory posture causes the US military to change their tracking strategies?
So the Zhao evidence and the Logan and I cards at the bottom of Advantage all say that because we have a first strike posture, based in the NPR, it means that we are actively pursuing China's SSBNs with our submarines so we can first strike them and in the context of a damage limitation strike. The plan solves that because it means we can no longer damage limit China and we can then use our submarines to track North Korean SSBNs.
So the reason that they stopped tracking is because we no longer want to first strike?
Yeah.
There are no other reasons why we track Chinese subs?
Our evidence says that that's the biggest one. Probably the only one actually,
Is
because
this
we
the
want to
biggest
damage limit them. Yeah.
Okay.
Like Logan says that there are other missions, but the reason our SSBNs are focused on China right now is because we are preparing for a damage limitation strike.
Okay. The maritime law internal link, the only part about this card that mentions international law is in a sentence that says that South Korea needs to, quote, join regional patrols that occasionally navigate through the SCS. The United States conducts regular patrols and freedom of navigation operations to ensure freedom of the seas and uphold international law. Why is South Korea?
I think we've read two pieces of cards, both Brooks and the one after that says that Korean's Blue Water Force is something that is very effective in enforcing maritime law and a critical internal. You are correct that there are other tenets of international law, but it is your burden to demonstrate why those matter more than Korea's Blue Water Force.
Okay. Why does... Wait, so the internal link for Iranian missile sales, who sells?
North Korea sells missiles to Iran.
Why?
Two reasons. One is North Korea feels insecure. Second is that the internal link card says that Iran has not proliferated yet, but will look to buy from North Korea if they feel insecure. So there's motive from both sides.
Okay. I don't really enough time for that question.
I don't have.
I think Joanna went to the bathroom, so
Okay.
yeah, try that.
Here, AirPods are connected.
Thank you.
Will it really mess with your headsets if we have the speaker going since I don't have headphones?
I usually what I do is I usually just take out my headphones during the speech anyways. So it's
Can I put it off?
also can't you just listen to it out loud?
Yeah, can I play it out loud?
Or like,
Oh, wait, yeah, no, sorry, I just realized. Yeah, you're right. I'm an idiot.
fair enough. I mean, this online debate sucks.
Stability and change.
Are you up here, Joanna?
Well,
You're in the room.
yeah.
Can anyone else who's on the internet hear Joanna?
Well, it's weird because I
Oh,
can
yeah, I got you.
myself.
I got it. Okay, perfect. Thank you. All good.
Wait,
Thank
give me a second. My laptop won't let me mute or unmute sound. So like now I can't. Wait, can you say something on the Zoom?
Hello, testing.
This says I'm muted. Okay, can you do it again?
Wait, sorry, I think we're having some tech issues.
Okay, we're good. Okay.
Are you
That's odd. That is so odd. Okay.
Okay. Kansas, y'all are good? Maggie? Lovely. Allied Assurance disabled post by W preferred to use status 23 shouts to Allied Assurance not equal to request and security review experts TVS commitment to security credible structure of the UC separate for include capabilities to not shape policy W also relieve correction assurance to reviewing serious China and you shred Allied Assurance its first station policy to work on use and if you policy with the losing stability only extended assurance to including confirmation of US regional allies to compensate for NFU pleasure China plus to contribute to nuclear development with the MBT US and upgrade difficulties like the US nuclear rebels right away for Chinese declaration being struck from the crisis China state China and the US much to do with more spacing attention getting US women and use nuclear construction eventual lots on the rebuild and such and harmonic Chinese suspicions US intentions considered what between a lot of US flash organization for his station on NFU would be China's interest in weakening US lines new nuclear states history of accidents preemptive war miscalculated conflict or misinformation biases or combined risks around 20 issues safer sex and more than evidence of the role of program for war Saudi and Turkey complementing considered for reliability based on insurance and reduce much by being career sharpening actions or preemptive war and provided by the United States evidence or office all rational evidence and data to provide false states facing multiple evidence misinformation small arsenals and evidence of our holders command faction combination generate risks the next office hospitality NFU covers all countries there are the internal NFU basic equipment the law conversation with any absurd under any contingency the plan or a policy requires a system of principles that's distinct from a pledge sought in the 20 pledges of promise of policies the system of principles to guide decisions and one through strategy procedure the plan is an NSA ROSAS and the 26 are variable definition of proceeds may range from a limited number of states or a zone it's voted for limits ground and precision infinite number of subsets and NSA modifications big act changes key to often in-depth research also make the topic bi-directional ROSAS negative groups not used against states may the impression the US is against other states to be legitimate the false sure if you and if you prohibit first use comes from more relevant the negotiating down security guarantees the next off the United States should declare that a nuclear reference use policy against the people's republic of China is a goal of the United States and work to put in place conditions that allow adoption directly their direct and internal study that identifies conditions that allow adoption and implement those policies or to facilitate adoption of a nuclear refugees policy against the people's republic of China establish a consultative mechanism with allies identifying and promoting conditions that make U.S. adoption consistent with U.S. and allied security interests develop a list of circumstances that warrant consideration of nuclear response to a non-nuclear attack and adopt the first use policy that makes clear it is significantly more limited than the 2018 nuclear plus review. The kind of plan addresses short-term risk of first use while building a process of learning how to allow eventual NFU adoption. The plan's abrupt change provokes backlash, which destroys solvency, collapses assurance and deterrence at Einhorn. The new trend with adversaries trying to rush out of the days about 90 days before reviews, rather than restoring base reporting against adopting inclusive members of the current and putting on track and saying, and then finding the have those left over remain present state from reverse mission to unpredictability, including the fears on the part of allies adopting if you have the righteous and the presence of their so the mission role change because the US consider use of news more limited than the 2018 environment of which on insurance and your constant responses to real down including nuclear attacks and extra nuclear the text of them could be dismissing the very hazard of nuclear fund demonstrate the role of nuclear system limited for the US has become company non capabilities of the make things that make a first circulation would be a reference accompanied by actions the usually distribution discussion surrounding Russian enhancing NATO and allied capability with missiles about the theory making and viewable policies raising the threshold for using giving and waste study about persons of make a better change in water and this has also be cars such mechanisms gain ally by him for sure and nucleus and UV never be good, but many the structures currently goes recognized as nucleus and potential benefits the structures of global acute that living conditions really exist that are on the red energy but the energy the best of remote conditions that make it reality. Adaptive learning in the nuclear decision making process solves best and goes collective capacity to solve existential goods that's ingrown. When you're trying to find reason for your relative among decisions whether on the terms system or confirmation bias the agent never appears not the work on which I pertain to change the best and acknowledge product psychology perspective the survey factors for we come see equal to the question told you the terms can be done regularly across the separate perspective stakeholders the person collective message just so the global junctions because the convention really knowledge comes with the credible alternatives less percentages more security by your polarized. The next off the United States should not use nuclear weapons first engage in sustained and detailed strategic stability discussions with China prioritize technical anti-submarine warfare missions and tracking North Korean ballistic missile submarines outside of conflict or crisis scenarios with China induced the Republic of Korea to focus on tracking North Korea, the ballistic missile submarines, SSD solves China warfare capability, running, managing escalation, central causes thinking, strength and strength of the regional state, the president or escalation, they can be more caught the crisis the way influence of before new shooters, Russia, China, must understand the problem with it, great, but even dialogue or satellite, of the with them, have more postures for agreement, and this CBM mitigate intervention for escalation, reprioritization planning solves US, ASW focus, and inducement solves SOCO brands, and then sending key availability procedure comes along with the international valley, helping the strength, sensation, leadership, no more allies, and contrast of relation to the allies from this, and that business having the message was sent to on how this project should be due, and the Texas before content signals worthwhile. The next offline is short of the FCC by agreeing to share evidence in the Russia program of the military's objections that's forwarded to UN. 720 is about to share over Russian war comes in from the FCC on the distributing and moving and spending over communication using that sign. Therefore, Mark uses such compliance forms to help keep cool, heated the relationship between the US and Turkey and the US stands for Islam human rights, also nuclear positions, voting on motivation. China and a few is opposed by the military convention body and training on a few people to meeting this Beijing and using the president and the US system little over resistance opponents including current recently the original military leaders are trying to change the meeting on China. Opposition spills over causes straight up and spurs military non-compliance pain and 20 involved in 7 recommended chief challenge for reference to military leadership turning on against that about Thompson does interviews with former officials military leaders including the military act as an terms of the area level policy and practice over the custom and considerable military the BC recorded the pursue the president's purple policies, the recording of sessions, the relevation disagreement, and military backlash. Credible ICC solves conflict. Powell, the attempting ICC offers a way to punish destruction, prevent deterrence against selling arms against security, and preserve rule of law, promotes really eager, aggrieved individuals that lives are taken to the road and has destruction, and will spill over residential ocean, not only able to have the expertise and social research for prosecuting United States programs, SAC, and over, and prosecuting terror networks. The advantage 1, China only NFU does not solve challenge. Anything you're selling into a strong competition against policy makers with the US and new advantage to the available unity disposition if US assume new competition with China, the new US policy structure with respect to other states may be able to destroy credibly to the Chinese French ideal or border preparation for Russia and Nuclear. These capabilities appear highly threatening to China, even if they can also really limited dynamic, even not the intent. And the plan's fiat is not announced, so adversaries would think it's reversible by future administrations. Uncredible pledges are worse for stability. Adversaries think it's a trick to get them to lower their defenses. That's Wagner. And a limited series to the nuclear weapons, something the adversary uses official US nuclear cross-country because we're trying to do adversaries from using report this campaign. Does that hold in false security so to cover policy not too much reduce stress sensitivity, not actually making the burden of adversaries related to these from the sector program. The advance program first strike no US China war working 20 years of digital involvement, nothing is about China propagation, window escalation, no use of regional use integration, but apply to range units, China favor of presumably some knowledge is not about nature, if you feel unfortunate strategy, and emergency means resolution into and in China building best innovation, doesn't work, potential damage, economic business, world signature, China depends on their own for that one, China's economy is struggling, so it's stronger, the US only rest of you have no big best, US China, the US also money management, China, the US second bunch of the city, and the US other band, one of the make everything for aggressive, the direction of cross relationship, no impact, co-location, correlate. And 20 on nuclear technology, reaction reacts to capable system, supply unusual a lot of existence, lack strategic empathy, but failing uses that we have to use all compared to alternative options, not to cover obstacles to use of all strength, nuclear strategic abilities, no capable system, producing nuclear escalation, nuclear workers, case studies showed with employment to protect them, fear isolation area, weak emerging tech doesn't alter strategic stability, primitiva, in 20 emerging tech, play with particular understanding for dynamic mature options that are real world effects, including AI, space, opsonic, quantified, doesn't take economic games, using assets, criticism, take what is overturn, usability, publicity, universally correlated, tech, with limitation of a force adaptation, and represent tech assessment, and reflectability of extra media, revolution, actual water question of effectiveness. Bureaucratic and institutional safeguards prevent US first use, but they'd be refused in the worst case. Like, these are being on the original understanding is not many clever solutions, not pleasant, and see if I'm on a new method, vertical, smooth, the solution, and best one thing, reason one, the other, shaking method, they're trying to just be or come up with new such when conscious special over days. Good question, the chief of that NSA drug safety will hold the process human elements, the key professionals and commanders on the fight can be crucial. And if you make Shalom conflict more likely and more violent, also, in the joining competing interests, stabilizing the mission of escalation, and considering for the US to advantage, take away that US from more sharply, managing China, offer aggression, US, and if you think that we can ability to determine for Rwanda, American Kurdish, regardless of the those regardless of providing use of drinks for second time, one shark, the time united, only for seconds, to discourage food for showing so that we have to report with the strategy, one more formally, the would have been deterrence, fails, such a more related industrial necessity, shop operation, make no difference, deter the day, purpose that if you make your mind more likely to rather willing to involve in tax on the homeland, the ASW advantage, new tax solves as Rob 121 continuing weapon system, programming for NATO room, starting to affect this integration, while these other we go well, ancestors, bridges, and rules, seeking subjects, helping communication, will you use, the rising deviations service requires the answer close to record on that doesn't mean actively not enough region will receive most of the applications of numerous and important undersea dominance. NK won't sell, or North Korea won't sell deterrence, it's lucky. And 17 Korea said they nuclear weapons to go back for Korea for being ambition, which is disabled and abandoned nuclear bullet, which they can place to the world and condition for James security, face all the risk at all. No around Gola, Fitzpatrick, and they try to rush and restarting purple combination based on Robert Jackson, and Richmond, the business running from the about the special regard, the Robert Reduction, Opposition, and the JCP way, but the threatening new resolution, not going on, all dollars and stuff, and all worship, and the super market, the first one producing, without building a war, and then the OC over around the business, Robert people should join that, and intensively monitored. No evidence that the status quo fails to track Korea subs, no go SSBNs, and 77 limited or private until moderation, no go countries, type of ability, or using liquid ground, their homes with coming down, terrible protocols, and proper much from length of veto SSP, too long, to come to SSBN is dying. The Zhao evidence proves there's no shift, regardless of declared policy, the Navy is committed to ASW against China, which is the highlighting South Korea lighting influence and status in dislodge regional power string and 20 years old poverty will stable along the measure of policy power terms of prohibiting the removal of individual contracts is nearly definite in North Korea threat will be aggravated of this code which is not part of materials well and the mission of veto repeals and regional institutions tracks governance collapse saying the unity regional which is maybe more than ever as long as regional bodies are really scared more stable than one set of weeks now when we're over the each has its rules on from the government to come back to America do over another region coming east or society to come out of the war with the present countries and the regime the rest of ethnic national partnerships may be critical.
Maggie, I talk from here. Does it echo at all? Okay. Status.
Conditional.
The counterplan that does actually okay. The SSD counterplan or conditional NFU counterplan. Why do you think it competes?
What it does not do an NFU. It also, as a matter of fact, is a first use policy.
Well, it says not using nuclear weapons first.
Oh, the advantage counterplan.
Yeah. No, the counterplan text says the United States should not use nuclear
Yeah, okay,
weapons
sorry. I
first.
think I labeled them wrong in the document. That counterplan competes because it's not a policy.
It's not a policy.
Yeah, it doesn't, it's not like we will put it on the books that the United States will have an NFU policy. It is that the United States should simply not hit the big button first.
Okay. The like learning counterplan, does it result in an NFU?
We think it would result in like conditions necessary for an NFU.
So like what does that
Likely.
mean?
Well, like, I guess,
Like
What are
okay,
you-
so like you
what
like
part
we
of it?
declare like so like do we get to say like say no? Like does a politician like a president have to like adopt it?
You can just say no.
Okay, okay, that makes sense. The conditions for an NFU, what does that mean?
yeah, the Einhorn evidence actually lists a couple. It indicates things like having strategic stability discussions in connection with adversaries, enhancing allied capabilities, protecting and improving
But
resilience.
it does
and
not
security.
create the conditions domestically, correct?
Wait, sorry.
It doesn't create the conditions domestically.
I don't know what you mean by that.
Okay, the last point, develop a list of circumstances that warrant consideration for first strike. Is there any world in which there is no circumstances?
Probably not. No, I mean,
So
not like
so the counterplan will
JCS.
retain the, well, if it retains some circumstances, that means the first plank and the fourth plank are in contradiction.
Well,
You
no,
said
because
one means that an NFU will exist, the bottom one means that we could still first strike
No,
because there's some
okay,
circumstances.
neither plank like fiats that an NFU happen or doesn't happen, or that we use.
Well, I know,
or
I
don't
agree, like, I
use.
agree like the MSU competition thing, but like, the first plank is like, we want ideal conditions for an NFU to happen. The last plank, you just said, will
No,
retain
it's a
first
list
into
of
some
circumstances
circumstances.
that warrant consideration of an NFU. It does not say make a list of times we would use first.
No, but you said
then
that there are
use.
circumstances that do warrant first use.
There could exist some, yeah.
Well, you said it would be non-zero, which means that
It's
there,
theoretically non-zero. Like, I am not part of the consultative mechanism that like considers these things for the counterplan. Einhorn evidence indicates that it's theoretically possible that we would find some
Fair.
instances where use happens, but like the process itself determines those, and
okay.
I'm not that process.
sorry, I don't remember what I asked, if I asked conditional, did I?
Yeah,
Okay,
yes.
great.
You did,
T and an NFU, the Sun evidence and NSA, like, I don't know, this seems like normal topic knowledge, and the NSA is towards a non-nuclear state. Why is this a violation?
It's not exclusively against a non-nuclear state.
Why?
Like, what part of negative security assurance makes that so?
Your EB says may range from non-nuclear weapon states, and then the second part that you've highlighted is in context of a free zone. Neither of those are the AF.
No. Like, yes, to a limited number of states or one particular state.
In participating in a specific nuclear weapons free zone.
Right, as an example, but like, I don't think this card says it's only non-nuclear weapon states. It doesn't.
Can. stopped at 9:27.
Okay, I'm sending out the 2AC right now.
I just got confused.
Okay, so it's advantage 1, advantage 2, T. The counter plan that like has the US declare that the NFU is like the thing that we want to adopt. Then the advantage counter plan that does like strategic stability dialogue. Does that make sense? Yeah, I've got those two. Okay. The CMR / like ICCDA assurances. And Zoom makes my computer run super slow. I've got you pinned like Gian did, so just wave your hands if I freeze. Okay, both of y'all got the doc? And Maggie good? Alright.
The first argument is that NFU does not solve stability. This is irrelevant because it's about Chinese perception of U.S. conventional operations in the region, which, if we win, it begets the question of NFU and China's NFU being real because only the United States would strike first. Next argument is it's not credible. This begets the question of China's NFU being real. It is. One is doctrinal statements and documents for retaliation. Two is investment technical viabilities for armies instead of first strike weapons, which is tell us three is capability. China does not have TNW's most recent study shows zero evidence and response of fear monger, which is him. It doesn't have to be credible because the U.S. would be the only one who strikes first. No war argument is wrong. Conventional conflict is inevitable. Accents enable and air units hegemonic clashes over SES and Taiwan and general belief inevitability, which is the clear evidence. Their evidence is older than our 1NC evidence, which says that there are recent elections in Taiwan that would make conflict much more likely. Here's another card. Hot subject conflict allocated 23 China's military against rocket behavior, active aircraft, and Taiwan agreements and Japan's. Easy, it's aggressive, the SS, US, Baltimore, British overreaction, provocation, days, able to move the and settle order, Chinese leading arsenal, 100% issues, military British, military, speed, borderlands, media, Taiwan, destroy, SES, magnifying anxieties, SES, basic capability, agreement, Solomon Islands, growing councils with the US at the region, edge, war, opportunity, Chinese leaders, war, and confidence, and LG, called out, something fishes day, must fight. Next argument is no impact to co-location. The Logan evidence says that SSBNs are new, and it's 2023 technology that China's developed because they exhibit similar acoustics as their conventional nuclear submarines, which means the United States would strike first in the conflict there. Next argument is that there is no impact to the nuclear weapon credibility thing. This might be true for U.S. first striking, however, it's not a gratuitous total first strike. Rather, in the instance of the U.S. losing a conventional conflict, they would strike first. The U.S. would, one, its entanglement, Chinese conventional nuclear system ensure nuclear preemption. Two, is doctrine. The NPR commits the U.S. to deter nuclear attacks with limited use. Three, is audience costs. First use war generations are exposed weakness and requires escalation, which is the Sweeney evidence. Their evidence says that they would stop a president from executing a total first strike. However, the commanders would be on board in the instance of the advocates. We are getting our ass kicked in a conventional conflict. The deterrence DA is wrong. First, is not to show the risk of for the Gomez team. Deterring low level aggressive combat territory doesn't get the belts too much goes down the ECS trains because you lose. Nukes prevent 600 rocks. The states too next over Chinese retaliation. Chinese assume the stakes will be too low for the US and Washington would restrain. Even if credible, China is more committed to fighting limiting the war cannot be turned white 18 Americas. Nuclear force will bring the Chinese to do more damage, which does make a difference. China not something short on the US. On the US, China less when we have war on this back off because there's greater losses, but that assumes two sides committed ready to accept cost and risk. This is not a case of supremacy nation. China does more than America 5 million dead, they accept 1/10 of that number. They've conceded the advantage thesis of mutual vulnerability. The US cannot create a disarmament first strike against China,
which means nuclear deterrence is inherently uncredible. The second advantage, I will concede that there is no Iran proliferation which gets out an external impact to the assurance DA, as well as that there is no impact to the global institutions which checks the conflict to the ICCDA topicality. Countermitigation pledges or policies, U.S. DAC and no dating policies pledge against action. Countermitigation asking environmental law, geographic woman 72 university might come through with one more government state or relocation by journals to find geographic region. NSA's distinction is wrong. UCS and 18 NSA's declaration that would consider using weapons first under certain circumstances, whereas NFU policies are against a specific country. Chinchilla and 20 no first use policy of not using nuclear weapons before another country. However, lose up an neutrality of individuality first use prefer. One is education, two interlinks, A is innovation, a year's worth of 4 asks produces still debates, discourages topic remain research and incentives or refinement. B is precision or evidence that the first US based discussion of NFU and its semantically precise. Theirs is an advocacy group defining how they would do their own. NFU 2 is functional overloading picks are beatable advantage to find engineers over power turns the average to sitting down. 3 we self limits because it's country specific and the neg is guaranteed deterrence, assurance, and modernization. Reasonable to solve is good, it's good enough. The counterblend with the allies, permutation do both. Turn to the counterblend, they must defeat via text and function. Both the key clash and grace by maximizing distinction. Should is not certain for counterblends, is for DSP for one. Should be about deception of the application of the possible interpretation that should is meant to leave some discretion. Preferred certainty competition is bad by legitimizing link unique counterblends. Do the blend if it's good, makes AFP impossible. Also adds infinite conditions to the AF plan, which is impossible to debate. The first advantage makes the counterblend literally impossible. It ensures that security will never be safe for NFU adoption given Chinese aggression on our allies. The process is also indistinct from the status quo. Consultation and working with our allies would cause Asian instability with China and North Korea. Young and 23 increased visibility of dispersal escalation in Asia, killing these allies. Visitors are provocative. Decision makes use of weapons falls against president. The centralization means time but not be shared with allies. It's unthinkable use to sacrifice this autonomy. And calls it trilateral Japan or alliances of political relation with China and NATO South. Thank you for transmitting the Christian security of the entire Asian region, resulting in balance of borders, China's solid economic integration in Asia together. Integrated deterrence of counterblend guarantees first use Coronavirus 23. US might use nuclear weapons to try to victory like air. The strategic attack of the US convey inferiority. US facing is not outside the possibility can try to conduct attacks of the US include disruptions. The grid of financial system rising level of vital interest of the US and the NPR single nuclear weapons used to hard to magic guns. Strategic exchange US might use using and Chinese ships. China retaliate by striking Guam. US and strike the mainland. China retaliate by ICBM makes both sides but counterblend made damage limited to try to give the US low yield is quite low pressure marginally for US perm do just the first plank of the counterblend that adopts an NFU permutation do any combination of the planks allies and the US will say no. So called 21 US is counterdebated for NFU and this difficulty is more where there are China versus the outcome determined by political weighted proponents and the political opponents and by the impact they may have another policy body can make the NFU with the police political detriment of other goals. Admitting the other counterblend. The SSD plan cannot solve. They will say no to any dialogue. Killing 23 China US officers, military lines, like LG, but progressive line. China's not agreed. US commitment to first is key to progress in talks. China says no to everything without the act. Blocking 20 NFU with sticking 20 talks between China and the US for a decade. China's been asking the US for a commitment. That is making the US commitment to do for central progress in talks. US to play China's willing to engage the US refusal to meet this one basic request. Significant dissent and permutation do both. It shields any residual offense and also shields linked to the DA because we communicate with China to create stability in the region. Permit the counterblend. They must compete the taxing function, which is on the other counterblend. No free policy means the US cannot be the first to employ nuclear weapons against the country. FA has 63. No free policy means under no circumstances US be the first to employ nuclear weapons. That means only changing weapon use is not functionally competitive, and if you does not have to be declaratory. Penalty in 97 restricting the force to question whether this should be declaratory or implemented by actions restricting the nuclear role responded. Nuclear threats only as if had to include no free policy. Every shift of weapons diplomacies or proclaiming policies. Declaratory picks are bad. They cause small employment constraint counterblends that obviates first use and steal the whole app, and as apps that lose the counterblends require signaling deficit to be whether sole purpose or process conditionalities. Voting issue constitutes your attitude and argument for responsibility. Dismissals are offense. The app chooses what then it goes for the ICCDA. There's tons of numbers for fights between Biden and the military now. Afghanistan and Trump are huge. CMR disruptions. Fights are high now. One is Ukraine, Lamar, and more than 23 Biden. Signal that certain acts of violence will not be tolerated. There has been frustration about watching deliver weapons. Ukraine depending on blocking Biden pursuing evidence impossible for more Russian war crimes, but another dent in the narrative growing disconnects over foreshadow a larger divide in how the world will end. The Pentagon is best out whether Ukrainian forces would dislodge Russia. Whispers have begun as to how terrible that would be. Two is Afghanistan. Shablan 21. Which official law makes committed. They recommended 2,500 troops remain in Afghanistan. Country Biden military chairman the JTS they agreed to that 2,500 troops will have the country full, which all will lead to the thoughts of Afghan forces. Your top military advisor warns against relying on the timeline. 3 is Agent Pivot 21. US CFG selecting and debate over whether to base American troops and weapons everything reach China disappearing the agency risk adverse willing against Capitol Hill. US forces near China prompting and Europe many assisted Pentagon is divided by the law. Defense Secretary Austin indicated they were interested in moving forces closer to quarters with China. The Afghan I don't think I want to say that. Fiat solves the link. The fiat to the U.S., which includes all parts of the executive, ensuring the civilians and military speak with one voice. No spillover. The relationship is resilient to the Pentagon will back Biden. Ward in 23 is not hard to think of a relationship built on one strong foundation. Blinken takes Austin advice. The loss of this express apprehension fully supports the president's decision. Biden's been in the political arena for decades. That's ability these two agreements side by side with the Pentagon all the time. The president has expertise to be confident. Also says want to maintain strong ties with Biden despite president's skepticism. The defense establishment secretary rarely airs policy battles, so knife fights internally and shies away from the spotlight. He's the ultimate team player. Seymour collapses academic garbage.
I have the ICC defense.
Oh, and yeah. Okay. No ICC eyeing 22 ICC raising concerns that a core may heading towards a higher business of justice, execution, jury, and action on Afghanistan, injury, and others accepting voluntary funding tasks with the rest of selective justice and leaves core vulnerable to manipulation, core remains silent in Palestine, and other investigations we can determine in fact and left avoided political attacks. Assurances. Proliferation now, 1 assurance is low, cost of pain, 11-15 allies are dissatisfied with credibility of assurance unit, 10 so nuclear arsenal, Washington coalition outside by Sokos. Interest appears unabated, Washington unimagined assurance, US canceled TLA and SLCMN, damage assurance reveals source code that US is unpredictable. Partner US is asking allies to trust, US will be willing to use strategic weapons on their behalf when US is vulnerable to concentration loss in allies, periodic is only device, allies to trust US enough no proliferation in Korea, Australia, concerns of allies are dismissed, rhetoric is sustained. 2, the first advantage denied, mutual vulnerability makes proliferation structurally inevitable, why team advantage to acknowledge the reality of vulnerability on the best credible relation, allies to Washington, argue it is committed, even if it means incurring nuclear attack, Chinese strategic force means commitments can only be credible if allies believe America is willing to fight. Those arguments cannot be presented. Washington refuses that rights by refusing U.S. reinforcement operation, not willing to otherwise alliances and to adversaries. Turn the plan, reassures allies, devalues nuclear weapons, and improves retaliatory credibility. Suit Consultants 21. Salience weapons danger can backfire allies while reassurance will not rationally use capabilities to the ally, though guarantees things relative to make reducers credible can. And increase support for accusation. First, states worry that would drive the conflict provoked by alliance and partner. Second, is U.S. decision to use nuclear weapons can drive allies to greater independence over value nuclear support, belief that weapons are necessary. Japanese drones have the value for avoiding risk with the U.S. alliance is just a sweet spot for deterrence to account for durability commitments while recognizing how credible nuclear guarantees development interest in nuclear weapons for scripts to apply broadly because the transonic nuclear are not viable. Weapons are less credible to low aggression and use will be contingently aligned to alliance and aspect of risk. No Japan proliferation rogue, 17 which Japan developed nuclear weapons not likely to be the Japan from older super defending acquiring them. Would a current classic alliance with a serious operational possibilities was available to concentrate dense urban areas makes it vulnerable given the lack of geographic depth or few places to play access to violate the constitution, EDOP, operating time table before also tail living. MBT and damage reputation sanction would fall. Japan would incur heavy costs every time Japanese have the possibility today. Acknowledges reality, no so pill of moonish 21 nuclear the dominant south like no fully committed non-consensus resistance to good proliferation and absorption to record verification nuclear materials nuclear is likely to be a breakout safer of sanctions impacts on the economies of the atomic industry and corruption alliance with US and arms research limits all likely to be fed deterrent even if no impact or cascade Kelly 22 no one believes Seoul launch out of the blue nuclear strike and put home research to be sloppy TBT estimate be good stewards no local cascade occur China Russia no call moved first troops training missile defense diplomacy friendly Vermonten and LM19 if no free security alliance commitments guaranteed can reassure allies and clear message they bring their commitments to common defense joint exercise and military exercise and BMD assurances are resilient Blair 16. A study finds either lead to public opinion about allies beliefs. First, using critical to defense is independent county knowing principle be reluctant to accounts for the allies to retaliate the injection weapons program when issued out of side obligation on jeopardize alliance with the US for losing US force, diplomatic isolation, sanctions, total and trade vitally connectivity's credibility. Theory is wrong, found in 2083, Crimea, invasion of Ukraine, and balance of the SS-15, dissipation of credibility, studies raise issues with credibility, Washington, Philadelphia, Vietnam, did IU strikes against Cuba, did not respond to Bosnia, FL2, attack Haiti. That Weiss is cut at Haiti.
Wait, cut where?
Haiti, coup in Haiti.
Alright, Maggie, you read it.
Is your mic on?
You can turn off your volume.
Turn off my volume. Okay.
So it doesn't like echo?
Yeah,
Is this
that
better?
makes sense. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I want to start on the SSD counterplan. The U.S. commitment first is key. Like, why does China say no without the F?
Because they think that a strict basically that it's sort of just a position of the Chinese state that they won't come to the table unless the U.S. commits to an NFU.
I guess this card doesn't seem like it cites any Chinese officials or representative
So
diplomats.
that's actually not true. So back in 2011, when the U.S. government and the DoD did some low-level track 2 policy dialogue with China, the evidence is analyzing the results of those, and multiple Chinese participants insisted that they would like to see an NFU before they engaged in further strategic stability talks.
Okay. The CMR just said Trump. What does that have to do with CMR?
Well, just he was horrible to the military, he pardoned war criminals, stuff like that.
Sure. Okay. The assurances said this cost load and pain card has lines like allies are quote seeking assurance in the form of displays of nuclear capabilities. Further down, it says that they were mad when the U.S. quote subordinated extended deterrence and assurance requirements to the U.S. commitment to lower reliance on nukes. I guess it seems like it agrees with the thesis of assurance. Why does that not answer the resiliency card?
Well, that might be true, but it also uses pretty strong language that's the U.S. is already failing to meet that.
Right. That
requirement.
card's about the SLCMN. They cut funding.
That's
and then
one
in
of them,
2023. No, it's the title of the article is TLMN and SLCMN lessons learned.
That's 2 systems, but there's
Right,
also
and then
some
the
other
U.S.
ones that
actually
are.
funded those in the NDAA a month ago because we were people were mad about the cutting. Why doesn't that solve?
And then the Biden vetoed the continuation of the SLCMN.
No, they just funded them. The white card.
I disagree with that.
Okay, the white card. There's a paragraph in the middle that says certainly there's a widespread view from the Asian side of the Pacific, and it would not be surprising if allies like Japan eagerly urged the drafters of the view to not acknowledge mutual vulnerability. I guess why should we trust Professor White over like what Japan literally told us.
It's definitely a stretch to take that line and say that means that the DA thesis of proliferation after the plan is true. Because yes, there will be security hawks who don't want the US to acknowledge mutual
Like, this card
vulnerability, but
concedes that
it's an
China-
objective fact.
This card concedes that Japan asked us to not acknowledge mutual vulnerability. Like,
Yeah, and nowhere does it say that that would cause allied proliferation. It equally denies the thesis of the DA.
okay, I'm not quite sure why.
Well, because like Japan has as equally a diverse political like ecosystem as the US, and there are obviously people who are like, no, don't do an NFU, don't do mutual vulnerability. All of your cards will only cite those people when the problem is like structurally mutual vulnerability is a fact between the US and China.
Okay, I don't have time for it.
10, starting now.
Yeah.
Anyone not good?
I don't. That's not good.
But you say you are good?
I'm not good.
Okay.
I'm good now.
Okay, sweet. The counterpoint solves the case. 1. It is the US engages in sustained detailed discussion with Russia and China for Washington procurement of CBMs, understanding the risk, de-escalates crisis, and avoids initiation of conflict. As per convention body. 2nd, if yes does not use nuclear weapons first, which answers the only explanation of how war ever escalates in the context of the advantage, because they say conventional conflict is inevitable and only starts from US first use. It solves the concerns that cause miscalc. This 19, complicated security houses receiver dialogues to assess intentions and understand security concerns so as to prevent accidents, occurs to by misfund judgments, and avoid competition becomes self-fulfilling. They have conceded the thesis that strategic stability dialogue solves the miscalc. If we win, say yes, it's a yes, no question, because they have no substantive answer. The Kawaki card is damning for them. It concludes, hey, it couldn't be clearer. The Kawaki 20, China has never made a no first use of our prerequisite for participation in international nuclear arms control agreements. The Kelly evidence is about direct military hotlines, but not about specific mechanisms of the counterplay, which occurs in pre-crisis negotiations. It solves escalation arms raising better than the app. China thinks the plan is too narrow to address their concerns. It thinks the trap disadvantage of Russell Melon 23. The risk has been caused by arms race, so potential for example, improving understanding and perception of concerns by self China's nuclear expansion, making perceived nuclear threats and nuclear weapons and deals with entering trench card. It's pretty disadvantage China effective how required to broaden us to include minimum new space A sets, conventional strike hypersonics, defensive cyber, and missile defense should be better understanding of returns to perception dialogue, prevention, most often to reduce risks to escalation. It solves better than an NFU. The plan is misperceived, absent broader dialogue and discussion, low reduce risk miscalculation. Job 23, Beijing maintains that NFU should be for most friendly discussion, but assumption discussion which China requires NFU is mistaken. There's opportunities for dialogue without Washington offering policy and discussions first step to understand Washington reduce risk and perception discussion. China sending kind of NFU with crimes going forces to play. The conventional nuclear negotiation discussion not require any policy changes. Set of negotiation for NFU open-ended discussion developing mutual understanding and strong foundation. Proper measure offers the best possible risk reduction. Permutation to the counterplan severs. The resolution requires positive safety. You have to restrict nuclear forces to adopt the no first use policy. The counterplan is exclusively negative state action to not use nuclear weapons first, which is sexually and functionally competitive. 1. Adopt a no first use policy. A. Adopt established official policy. Maryland, no date. 2. Establish an official way. B. No first use policy. Act the legislation. Access Center for Arms Control and Operation. No date. You also adopt the NFU policy. By enacting legislation or present issue and access C policies deliver course of action. Now single impact. 11. Word policy. Get up instruction in additional decision policy. Needs a principal course of action adopted by immediate deliver across which government formula policy. Also must understood as seeking principle deal with any occurrence whenever occurs. D. Restrict requires law. This word no date. Restrict only access to the law. E. Positional competition. When I say cross was abundantly clear, the app is only declaratory positional. As best anything else makes it impossible to hold them to a stable position throughout the debate, which makes them a moving target, rejects severance, negative state action, has new day ground, and limits action. The plan is key to decide links and tons of ask if Fiat notice and tons of different contingencies. After you'll still get the argument that the app is secret so long since Fiat in law or an executive order to ensure leaks ground. Now, the next argument was do both. It lists the net benefit. The shielding explanation is nonsensical in the context of the disadvantage because the counterplan doesn't do an NFU policy, which is why the basis of all our link arguments. There was not a links to net benefit argument made in the 2AC, which means warning art does not get to blow it up. New permutation, or the next argument was declaratory picks bad, they're good, and negative. That's essential part of the resolution to restrict forces and adopts no first use policy. That means any positive Fiat could solve the Fiat which key best policy option test. Intrinsic disadvantages they chose to make the app declaratory only and have no defensive declarations key, which is absurd. It's not utopian. It's not like we have no use kind of war and the no retaliation or no use counterplans have been allowed on every topic. You should reject the argument, not the team. Conditionality is good. Counter we get what we did. First, like flex, sandbagging, side best, infant prep means negative more conditional advocacy for reactive ground. Second, argument experimentation solves risk aversion, incentivizes new argument position, key to critical thinking and testing. Third, logic the counterpoint is bad, it's not proven. The plan is good. No offense. 1 is used inevitable from fast speaker, short dissets and T, perms, 2 choice add-ons. Overall, arguments all check. Second, this bill fails, incentivizes backflash, generic sauce, the 2 to dictate that strategy, there's no PD consensus. What it is. Third, view the judge, referee, not a norm setter, concede reasonability from topicality, a high threshold for FDU, encourages substance or stick us with the counterplan. Now, the gradual counterplan. We will explicitly concede that Congress and now they say no to NFU. No takebacks. A 2AC drop that the link alone turned solvency. That was tagged. I want to see Einhorn. No new 1A responses. NFU in the current political environment provoke widespread domestic and international backlash that injects uncertainty over the app's implementation. Even if the app is durable, it's never perceived that way, and it's perceived as getting rolled back by future administrations because it's so unpopular as per all their arguments why they say no. Now, the advantage. China only NFU doesn't solve 1. Even if the app ends first, threats, US policymakers are committed to nuclear competition to make mistrust and instability inevitable. 2nd, the subset makes the app not credible. The US maintain counterforce capabilities for Russia and NOCO. That China perceives as threatening, even if the US does not aim to defend. Thus, comments refer their internally either assume a reciprocal NFU treaty that would include verification and negotiation not included in the app, or a universal NFU that would include posture changes that subset apps can't make. Aeronautic adversaries will still plan for US first use because the risks are too large if they believe the plan in our wrong. Also 21. Proponents must recognize they're asking leadership to your trust in thinking if they saw that for their policy to the New York popular trust in place, not for misplaced trust. And stress relentless risks actually make very difficult to consequence of far less than operations in the north. Especially combat threats and nuclear strikes and policy. That's what requires leadership to farmers with each of the improved wrong. It's comparative. China cares more about capabilities than declared intentions. As per Convention Round 21, since for more stock capabilities and actions than declared intentions, perception the US needs our capability to preemptively attack adversary nuclear forces make. Trying to think the US managed nuclear is more rather than actually what China would arguably
would use arguably low use special just ability of difficult to achieve versatility or arms control NFU without reduction of weapons or NFU's spell would be meaningless. The firebreak argument is wrong. China's NFU is fictional. Probably 20 arithmetic alone makes the case for China's attack being the most likely scenario because it's backed by the most effective China NFU's pledge is almost certainly fictional. China's martial isolation push racing course first. China's push rapidly building inventory mobile ICMs SLBMs to looks like imitation of Russia. There's all causes of strategic stability. Their advocate concedes that an NFU alone is insufficient to mitigate miscalculation risk, lack of dialogue and confidence building measures. Some improve only the counterpunch mission to solve, which there when you see Benedict and combat evidence, I'll insert in the document for reference. Now, the No China War 1, internal issues overwhelm, CCP legitimacy crises, COVID, real estate slump, etc. Forcing the CCP to focus inward. I mean, the risk of them initiating conflict is minimal. Second, economic interdependence dissuades US China and China's supply chain linkages mean China would never initiate a projected war with its neighbors because it's more damaging to itself than smart. Third, deterrence checks. Even assuming you check breakthroughs, they aren't disruptive enough to strategic stability, countermeasures, and overall military deterrence. Opposed Kunartova that miscalculated conflicts only happen to shifts in power balances. Nuclear deterrence works, trans 20 worse. Don't happen inadvertently. Yes, there's sometimes misjudged. Yes, certainly going to achieve at the cost of embarrassment. That's the same thing as saying war won't happen. Best of the best way of avoiding war, critical maintain the balance of power and perception use committees. Sounds like a low reduce could imagine war going the way that shouldn't. They just was getting rich perception the way it was the keys. The fourth is mathematically near zero. Dio concept at all 18 2 methods of quantifying the historical data false alarms individual of hard takers from no rather that events will be used to determine frequency of nuclear war. Those several events pretty state of us are factor you were enough to make it pass routine checks. Probability of inadvertently initiating nuclear war multiplying this with false alarm probability was 7.65 e to the negative 4. One failure in the rebel balance is 5. China will escalate as strategic vulnerabilities and economic interests. This way it enters every hotspot. Black Sun 21 should scholars identify flashpoints and create ECS, SES, and Taiwan war. It's not likely to serve US interest while providing assurance to Taiwan while discouraging PRC. Revenge China's support so far avoiding open war. Actually, cloud transaction avoiding crossing threshold in open war. Future present nails, US cameras, war to break out trying to be one of both chairs. Wars of 14 countries bring a potential for the hack numerous runs certain economic return China sending Japanese, US, and EU investments thus overwhelmingly dependent on goods passing through market straight avoid out wars. China operating paramilitary force. They say co-location is wrong. One, it relies on usually loose pressures, which are empirically denied and extremely illogical because it makes no sense for a country to guarantee their own annihilation by overreacting to a US attack. That's correct. Second, there's no impact NFU check and other options like flushing sets more likely chronic. 21 gears maintain US strikes against located bases cause nuclear escalation. No reasons to doubt this fishing maintains NFU will could be abandoned. Does not. No retailing is not warheads. Not enough early warning to defense report trying to move into LW. The evidence does not support this. Leaders know that first strike would result in a nuclear response more likely to avoid. And by the even if you're the strong would be integrated and flush them range with mobile missiles enhance survivability more trapped to the prevent and disarming strike without inviting retaliation. Arcade road. DLA commanders more likely to launch on our for the China's DNC corporations negative control precisely because part of the leadership trust. Low level commanders no US first use embedded checks of the National Security Council can halt the process and block any illegal first strikes. Illegal strikes will be caused by embedded bureaucrats rejected by the military. Figure 17 confusion about decision making and risks conflicts here. No one can stop the president ordering nuclear weapons. It's going to extreme Russia. The president can take nuclear war with a tweet. It's not reasonable to lead procedures that they operate without objections, except to simultaneously award this as national security team efforts bypass leadership. But arms support in the military trained to reject the orders since nuclear war started fire alarms on the system. Launch requires consultation with multiple veto points and can be blocked if illegal. Dunlop 17 if officers refusing to obey orders to launch nukes. So there's nothing new about legal orders. Nuclear CNC is a delivered process that involves the Secretary of Defense, Chairman, and Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Secretary of Defense, and the state as the CIA is just a consultative process. Is absolutely true. The military must not obey unlawful orders. Irrefutable principles not unique to any administration. The military would dig in and refuse in periods. Fever 17 Colonel Keller emphasized military thoughtful orders and multiple layers gives high confidence question, but actually asked for president would find exceedingly hard to act in war, but in third finding challenging persuade policy the military objective, which are far less consequential than the war. Yet all these are the result of lengthy struggle that involve many more people than just operators. Non-presidential safeguard check. Minor 20 NCC focus on preventing one of the barriers is PAL. Besides the president, there are additional mission attack option unlock code is sent to launch crews and only those missile crews additional weapons. They lack unlock codes to arm aim, target, and fire. They demand a legal ruling. Mecklen 17 concerns fear based on misreading that president can fire off a nuke that's not true. They assess concern just for the CNC system. Dams reflecting that being highly creating a crisis, not realistic picture of scheme. The military also raised questions. They asked what is this legal? They was get a ruling. I have a minute left. Okay, let me find some more cards. Did not expect this. Maybe you want to read the dissent overview or something? Oh, should I actually turn them at the bottom? Ooh, yeah. Wait. Hold on. I'll send these out after. And if you bold this conventional nation of Taiwan, it signals unwillingness to defend Taiwan, incredible nuclear threats impossible, that's nonsense, and emboldened decision-making space to pursue conventional attacks. Will be 16, can anyone possibly challenge against conventional war answers to China? You'll across the government authorities for showing conventional balance of power is becoming corrupt nation gives silly forces that present growing China's ability to effectively project power within the China administration effective veil of conflict remaining limited to US. Guarantee them not using government sources to transfer confidence in wage conventional war from gain for the confidence arising from impossible decision-making military stuff and artificial for military forces so stimulating and bold, credible, and appealing. And beyond bold and if you pledge to increase the chance of war with Asia, it is perceived as credible. The threat is certainly perceived by China for 1120 for Chinese leadership or invasion would have to be common against the ocean using new weapons for transformers invading. Particularly the amphibious landing fleet by 2018 years, taking certain verticals would use a little bit of against China invasion fleet and amphibious landing operations would be vulnerable to nuclear attack. They believe US Russia is a consistency messaging forming 14 for Asian perspective, particular policy to Washington determining extreme circumstances, member sorties and weapons respect first and rebel endurance power capability. Also, that, sorry.
You can just do it after you're done.
Nah.
You don't need it.
I'd like to read these deterrence cards myself.
Fair enough. I marked that last card at capability, which I put in the doc. And obviously you don't have that card, so you can't argue yourself. So
Okay, well, hold on. Sorry, my computer just froze. Okay, there we go. Alright, sorry, you're good?
Yep.
Okay, so your definition of adopt says to establish in an official way. Is the counterplan not established in an official way?
No,
Then what is it?
it just fiats the US does not use first, it fiats the action of the president.
So it does it not officially establish that the US will not use nuclear weapons first?
No, but it durably fiats that the president of the United States does not use nuclear weapons first.
But that seems like
It's not official.
something established in an official way.
No, it's
Okay,
not.
then what about this no first use policy one? It's the president or legislation. Is the counterplan done through the president or legislation?
It's not an executive order.
What is it?
It's just fiating the president. It's inaction.
That's executive action.
No, it's not. It's not an executive order to not do anything.
Okay, your evidence says the US could adopt an NFU by enacting legislation, or a president could issue an executive order. Where does it say that that's the only way to do an NFU?
I'll admit this card isn't the
It's
best,
not
but
good.
it does
Okay.
contextually
Sholia.
adopt the NFU policy and describes
Policy.
what it means
The
and
word
what it means.
policy cannot be stretched to mean an individual decision. A principle is a course of action. Is the counterplan not a course of action?
No, it's an individual decision by the president to not launch.
It seems like a course of action to me. Would you
So
care to
I feel
explain?
like it's a pretty consistent explanation that it is only the president and that it is not an individual decision.
Explain that for me. What is the decision part of it that matters?
Well, the first line is it cannot be stretched to mean an individual decision. There's a difference between fiating
So the
the action
definition
of
of
one
it
person
then
not
is
doing
a
something.
deliberative process. Could the president deliberate by themselves to adopt an NFU?
Can the president deliberate by themselves? That's not a mandate of the counterplan. The counterplan just fiats and does not use. It does not do anything about posture or policy or future decisions.
I know, but the distinction
It's
that the
not
policy
codified
card
principle.
makes is about like deliberation. So where does it say that? Or I guess okay.
Are you really
I actually
under the counterplan, you're looking at Decatur now. How do you not have like a public perception key deficit? Come on.
well, your interpretation legitimizes the Duda's secret counterplan. But we'll have the debate. Okay, so the case page. A couple of the cards you've read that are like U.S. won't strike first is like back when Trump was like I could fire off a nuclear weapon as fast as a tweet. What evidence do you have that assumes when the military is also on board with striking first?
We've read a bunch of cards that like both answer like that thesis and just say that like
Well, so here's the problem, right? It's like the cards, when they answer that thesis, they say it's wrong because the military would never all out launch our ICBMs, right? But what about like a limited instance of nuclear use in the Pacific?
no, it says they would reject nuclear strikes on face because there needs to be like a justification and it needs to violate like it goes through the normal process in which they like consult the National Security Council and determine if the law of armed conflict applies in terms of proportional response, like all the things that go into the process. Like they can't just unilaterally strike. Even assuming the military gets involved, you read other cards, so there are other viewpoints outside of the military, like public pressure, Congress, like other people finding out, try to block it.
927. Yep.
Concede Japan and Soviet never pulled there's no impact to the link turn. They should not get to cross-apply the slick on the state thumper because it's only about assurance, but there was no indication that it applied to both. Even then, it doesn't thumb this control. And then 20 years when he was operational nuclear batteries already seen as memos and necessary to believe in sensitive messages. It's not surprising it is much more request of delivery funding. Indicated from Mr. Cosper, who would have delivered early taking not really controlling the drive. I just want to refer to the link of the nuclear tribe. Look it up. And then slash absolutely meant the military backlash you said. ICC credibility turns it outweighs against. First, ICC ensures international crime observes the rule of law degree, and instability is a crucial stopgap for the failure of national courts. Internal instability escalates global hotspots Ramberg, and these issues of security nation is your region accepting the rule of largest confesses for arsenal of the summer is balanced on Russia, based restriction of Asia, the presumed nuclear remains safe until countries, constitutions, vulnerable terms of failing governments, and power chains, diverse, and the war of these weapons, and crisis change fast, cloud thinking, mitigation, to defeat. Second, it's a many unique disclaim that solves the scenario for escalation. Flashpoints are inevitable to credible ICC ensures they stay and contain. Given 13, the ICC will influence and repulsive pulsation that the constitution secret infections with the bottom of the back on peace one. The rest of it will work the antibiotics, mental use, support them, peace, which is ignore social security, fail, justice, foundation, and negotiation, trust, the representative, and distribution of the longer reasons to contribution to the ICC, council, legitimacy, support, capacity, ICC is like to make a positive contribution to peace, regretfully recognized, and the world legislative. My third, transnational crime makes nuclear use inevitable. They cannot impact her because news in the one and C card, Canadians, 12, Russia, and the increase in the electron use, potentially stabilizing Russian arsenals, maintaining security policy, security, EWS, investigations, race, and sort of accidental watch, and then just reading organized crime and terrorism. Fourth, the link alone in terms of solvency, military opposition causes them to slow roll, water down, and then oppose implementation that's pain and the political firestorm turns when crisis and instability cause internal such policy to negative actions invade by the US nuclear systems are compatibility with have no answer specifically to Russia, China, making their one components say real more reduction visuals and to create entirely new policy justification for issues to nuclear weapon system and reconcile those answer systems and then states like then China and more debate about using nuclear for policy with potential access and concern allies. The uniqueness, the conceded issue specific uniqueness, military compliance with Biden's priority is high now. There's only members of the plan upsets that delicate balance if they win that there's some justification now, but it does not prove resilience. You have to say massive change to US policy in direct contradiction of military preferences, which will be on the link debate. The Pentagon, the Biden has the Pentagon dictates nuclear strategy to avoid fights for Xi'an, and they treat new Western methods to see superiority as control of armor policy against the nation, continuing further south the direct policy. The Pentagon controls the pen, and Biden concluded as costing German fight for reduced to ultimately not dictating strategy, and Charles we are resisting any operation current programs on the thumpers. Biden's got military support now, he's catering to repair it, and then showing Biden needed to short support on the Pentagon's preparation to progress the president maintain defense spending raising his fierce time and really nothing more than loss of love. Result of problems, social false not commanded the military Biden is smart though. The word Trump is not a thumper because there's no warrant or explanation, but the dissent is about Biden's relationship over ICC sharing Ukraine. Ev is outdated. The military at one point denied sharing intel, but has since backtracked, which is what our war unique evidence says. It proves that it's contentious and the military is willing to withdraw support. The military has agreed to cooperate with the ICC now, despite reservations. Bertrand Hansel 727 might have interviewed war crimes with the whether the both registered earlier this year, but told CNN the Russian cooperate. Post-dating matters because their evidence is before Biden pushed them to share. The military reversed course. Now the Afghanistan thumper, it was 2 years ago and long before Biden's current agenda. In the interim, he's completely diverted the military on nuclear issues. The military blames Trump, not Biden, for that. Miller, Richard, 23 years for Biden, same against the will try to take Biden's ability to save decisions. That his predecessor, the Dutch Asia pivot evidence, is that there is a fight between Pentagon and Congress, which is completely relevant for Biden's agenda with the DoD, but it proves the link thesis. The DoD is refusing to implement congressional priorities, which demonstrates the military backlash argument I've inserted in. And for reference, the next argument was to ourselves a link. Fiat is normal means, not instance. Bypassing real processes and uneducational and kills net ground for backlash-related dissads. Our link proves that there is a political cost during the plan. It's not a writer or full-time link which instantaneous patches the voice, but even absent of a long fight, the military will extract costs or in terms of the plan's implementation begins immediately, but there is still debate. The link to make proper, they conceded that China had views opposed by the military. They were accused of being weak on China, which is Berkovich and body frame thumpers through the magnitude of the link. Other fights have fizzled away, but the plan is direct, which is of the military use to nag any pocket of support for NSU is based on it being a good idea, is drawn out by the stronger political weight of opponents. I'm not reading new cards because they conceded the S spillover debate. Military backlash to the plan spills over. First, political cost. The military will respond to the plan by exacting political revenge on Biden on other priorities. That's a pain evidence. Second, shirking. Presidential control is a process, and the military will engage bureaucratic obstructionism, which flips them from working to shirking on Biden's agenda. That's pain. In 2020, the military engaged in obstructive practices involved shirking engaged in adversely implementation of the Russian military rights experience, because the political cost of propensity called criminal locking political weapons associated. It also requires the president directly to tell the military president to worry about the political implications of opposition to that advice. History reports and detentions. Third, horse trading. Biden will buy off support for the plan by trading other issues that the military wants. Pain in 20 years of acquiescence in the military, the president negotiating willing and holding still places the room for horse trading. Military leaders represent means that interest civilian leaders may offset opposition with the military, providing bureaucratic movement because the military moves close to civilian purposes and given issue in return from other objective military holds. Fourth, sidestepping. Fiat requires a plan to sidestep military opposition. It decimates support for presidential priorities. That's pain in 23 civilian bargaining where civilian leaders fast policy purposes and political and then calls for shooting applies considered military represents by properly side. And and then maybe not small research has considerable cost of trust between civilian and military advisors and the president firmly committed to enact that, and the copies of the military leadership may be rolling sections that are powerful disincentive to the child, presence of military advisors, military political weight represents serious to child civilian debate, not a insufficient BC question to the importance of having the military on board. The next argument, all answer ILAW fails cross-apply from the impact defense. We read on case, the ICC just said it's not an ILAW impact. They punish war crimes to promote the rule of law, preventing extralegal measures, preventing extralegal measures to resolve conflict. They are unique and expertise and resources to deter conflict and access the root cause of instability. The next part was ICC fails. They do not unique expertise and resources to deter and address the root cause of instability. That's powerful, usury, and negative. Their evidence is from before the U.S. intel sharing, which shored up their credibility and capacity. They are effective, creates terrific global capacity building, rapid, and then as well criminal justice, even complete as a structure for people who are crimes, and also establish short the community, make actual several ICC sets our sharp position, encourage national citizens to develop their legal responsibility before the conformity is universal. ICC is effective, even if imperfect. That's Kenny. Name field over ICC message or possible to provide accountability and justice for war strength is supported on the role and ICC women's human rights rule and trusted national responsibility to for accountability and restriction. Their court has no qualifications, and it's from like an international NGO just crapping on the ICC because they think their own thing is better. Now, in case they read some more CMR defense argument is related but distinct from that general argument about CMR, ignore the inherently political nature of the executive military relationship, which includes bargaining and strategic interaction. So you should strike any cards about CMR off the flow because they do not strike at the core of the military, political, and the backlash or relationship.
My turn. No.
I didn't finish. That was it.
This is done.
502. We stop at 502. It should be sent. I don't understand this is too short. Oh, this might be too long. Okay, the order. The order, Maggie, is the advantage, the like slow counterplane with the deficit, the counterplane that matters, and then the CMR descent.
I'm just got it done. Sorry, so.
Good, that's good. Maggie, are you good? Okay.
First year arguments on credibility or whether because it can see that the US will strike first in. When the China doesn't have an NFU, so stability will never escalate. After the F, China's NFU, the China's NFU is real. When is operation? No TNWs and survival of make it impossible to his doctrine lack of first use growth. The official statements and white papers disprove neg. Arguments pry is a hack and China's NFU is a lie. Assumes and Logan 20 million. The cause of confirming policy such NFU is a word. They're not needed. The rocket forces unit extra condition and nuclear action. The first operated after search strike and report collision occasion. Later attack champions of China's NFU. That is true. Even if extreme intelligence when I do. The Chief Overseas has the control to capability given. Risk calculating accident conflict civil the pre-delegated authorities you see in the soul authorities TV shown. The controls of the shore the church rather than warfare posture can be one of the laws as soon as they receive it. But as I can not execute operation in the case of extremists. Next argument on conventional conflict. The bloc has conceded multiple warrants about deterrence breakdown now. 1. Maritime vessel clashes and resource disputes. 2. Is Taiwan. Arms sales and recent elections make invasion or U.S. has to support inflammatory. 3. Is internal pressure. Don't assume domestic pressure, intermilitary, nationalistic pressure. Overall caution, force, interdependence, sense of new competition, trade, cyber technology. Not collapsible religion. Blocks that is too old. Deterrence is breaking down now. War by 2025. Outweighs on time frame. Cave and Lee lists multiple hostile chain. SES Southeast hegemonic interest leaders. The declared inevitability. Brains and math do not assume rational calculated war. It is too junior to hegemonic interest. I'm going to concede the accidents card though because it takes up the impact of the CMR descent. The next argument about the next argument about entanglement. We read Cronin for 2 years later. That says that is a U.S. policy. It doesn't assume new submarine capabilities that are unique because the Chinese submarines are required to share the same core experience about rational calculus. Not irrational one. Illegal use is irrelevant because it is a legal one under doctrine. So I'm not going to answer any of the cards. But the U.S. strike first. One is doctrine. Limited nuclear sustained in U.S. policy, especially if we hit a base or a boat. 2 is audience cost China. Success creates an Iraq level development, so policy desperation. 3 causes the first strike. 2, 3 is entanglement system errors ensure the U.S. overreaction to an SSBM, which makes it more likely for its inferiority. The U.S. will lose against China conventional conflicts, so the U.S. will attempt to recover the first use. Lastly, the deterrence of invasion is inevitable. They've conceded 2 AC arguments. 1 is electoral pressure. U.S. arms sales and inter-Chinese demographics. So no uniqueness or the impact of first use is uncredible. It's disproportionate for grains of aggression, but contest for Taiwan and primacy is existential for China. So the first use is not a consideration, which is why it doesn't assume links out 23 June phase 1 will go CCBG. Give me innovating as well. The mission phase 0 concept CCB lucrability you could have the party military risk of access to public zero basing education not give up while used the church may cause CCB reconsider currently about personal on China progression never CCB the takedown is irrelevant. The other than the counter plan the Congress say no stuff is irrelevant because we durably feel that the US will never strike first and the crisis stability stuff on the other page. Now go to the no strike counter plan. 1 there is a deficit that should be sufficient. Conventional conflict is inevitable. There are evidences that it causes miscalculation but it's not resolved. The US and China heading towards conflict conventionally which is a big enough deficit given that we both solve for nuclear strikes but no nuclear strikes 2 perm do the counter plan is example of the plan that's not the function competitive. First the counter plan feels the US would not use a nuclear weapon first. 2 AC that's the same thing as a no first use policy because the concerns weapon deployment. Second the term no first use of policy do not require announcement. 2 AC Permovsky said weapon deployments are NFU functions. Negative action is included And implement policy, and 20 nuclear declared policy will implement how weapons are actually used. The teacher or highly classified implemented directed by influence on how we will be employed. Adopt is endorsement policy as individual, to endorse policy and to by native restrictions or implications that state action native word restricted by implementation. Preferred declaratory picks seal all app options by secretly viewing the same action. That makes the app debate themselves into so the object field clash ways education on the controversy of the topics as opposed to employment. Distinction is the only term of impact. Fairness is a tiebreaker given. Their model would break the game by removing the only intrinsic app advantage and if you still checks their offense. Since instantly targeting apps have no answer to the team W pick, the neg that word still gets links to CMR flexibility distance and counterpunch that abuse signaling deficits like interagency consultation that don't link the plan but don't solve the whole app reasonability will defend secrecy for competition because the counterpunch sucks to debate but now it's for substance perm interpretations. Positional competition is wrong when you see car sex instead for the pursuit of substance and declaratory not for counterpunch B as positional competition is bad. It encourages the DDEF counterplan plus econ impacts with voice transition. It is a slippery subject word picks because position is slippery feels fairness in education drop that counterplans must be both technically and functionally competitive. That's key to fairness and clash by maximizing the distinction. Then ensures equitable distribution of deficits and then net benefits. Conditionality or disadvantage. Okay. The disadvantage. The overview lacks an internal link of why conflicts are escalating in this kind of scope, which means that the ICC and this term length empirics prove that some countries still decide to go to war, but they're intervening actors. And then all the hotspots that the 1NR has escalated. I'm going to do the big ones. No impact on the sweaty impact. The submission conventional capability impacts the literacy versus the story. But a particular impacts the leader as long as it impacts the nuclear. If you need operation government India just high level the government, the tropic risk impacts the India threshold. Russia will not use the nuclear country by and the risks are decreasing because of the close Nigeria. It's the one that costs nuclear like the best industry. The region doesn't say easy and then Russian victory. Mark the card of Russian victory. The other external Russia impact says that it's accidents. Defense on the other advantage takes that out. Lastly, terrorists no. The rest of 20 other corporate created mitigation terrorists that are physical. The single room is going to be target gun. The same attack that far less effective terrorists can say I got my device terror. That income they may struggle substitute voting. That millennium might take you back seat and just many fucking this way terrorists this secret initiative. Well, paying attention. Meta uniqueness does not concern China because you can see the conventional conflict is inevitable on the other page. The accident sequence takes out the next card. And lastly, the ICC fails. We have the most recent piece of evidence that says that it's toothless. It's getting co-opted by money in the status quo. And the fact that ICC was not able to deter Russia or Russian war crimes and the fact that Palestine are silent on Palestine all demonstrate that it is toothless and conventional conflicts, if they were true, what escalate inside of the status quo. The next two cards that they read about ICC being effective are way too old and from 2018. And we read a card from Amnesty, which is one of the leading international organizations. Lastly, no spillover. Tracy Ward says that Biden and the Pentagon have strong relationships and move to support one another during a political crisis. That means the plan has a localized impact and doesn't cause friction. Then over agreements, it does not cause shirking because Biden's view distorting the military and Austin has disagreements. They interact hundreds of times, so shirking this breaks in 20. And then when military leader like the president of Obama the office of the object leaking of actual troops. The military influence manifests hundreds of times the greater matter. And the policy touch on the many international and anything else steers decision away from civilian military leadership. Stop by sending proposals straight to security by passing clear zones outside the Pentagon policy and subordination. And then serve their interests. Lastly, uniqueness. Ukraine key and the post states is a sham because it demonstrates that the CMR relationships can still recover, demonstrated by the fact that Afghanistan was the biggest blunder. And they disagreed over Ukraine, disagreed over Ukraine, which means that all the 2AC suffers still play. Lastly, I law is toothless. Euro 1 and C evidence says the ICC still enforces international law and still matters insofar as it's about international standing, which means that there's something in it.
So you still, you can, your mic's still on?
Yeah, I'll mute it.
Just want to make sure you do that. Oh, sorry.
order is going to be the C. Marta said, the advantage counterpoint, and then the advantage. Oh, can I record this on your phone again? Sorry. A credible ICC acts as a conflict dampener across the world. It always does scope. There are hotspots and tensions across the world, including Pakistan, China, Russia, failed state, which can escalate in moments' notice with no status quo mitigation. They said conventional conflict is inevitable. Only we have a mechanism to solve it outside of the Pacific, which is the realm of evidence. I'll specifically extend the terrorism impact decay. Evidence says that loose nukes are required to terrorists due to maintenance security problems caused intentional launch because they need the second strike. One air defense card is only about COVID and literally just says people are social distancing and get sick, which is relevant solved by those 4 years of vaccines. The conceit of the link alone turns solvency and crisis stability. The military will slow roll and water down the plan. No new truly are responses because the 2 are shaped off 1 air mistakes. Durable fiat is not solved because it's about implementation. The controversy alone turns crisis stability because it forces US to justify every nuke reconcile it with China, which is what they want to enable aggression, which is a piece of causal evidence. The residual uncertainty of the massive politicization definitely turns the case. It means that if used and inherently perceived as uncredible and is incapable of resolving conflict. The ICC is not thumbed. Conflict remained contained and not in proliferate powers for the last 70 years. Betty Uniqueness Scottish from an IR professor doing empirical study in the F has no counter explanation for how it solves conflict. It doesn't name drop them, but the study applies and analyzes dynamics that China is involved in, like North Africa. The ICC is effective versus the return effect. It incentivization to domestically implement reforms and creates norms, which is the raw evidence. Second, even if it is imperfect, it upholds rule of law and provides accountability for egregious examples of public change, which is petty evidence. Third, air negative. None of the 1AR assumes a world in which the U.S. increases intel sharing to make it more effective by providing the necessary information in order for accountability measures to be effective. They have no contextualization and have not answered any of those second line warrants done by the 1AR, which means you shot let the Twitter wax poetic on this because they sandbagged and just made a bunch of different arguments sporadically throughout the globe instead of doing concrete and in-depth analysis. Yes, spillover, they dropped the link debate, which was matter for this law. First, political costs. The military responds by enacting revenge and other Biden priorities. And they haven't really extended any thumpers instead of just saying the words Ukraine over again, but not explaining how that thumps to link or how the specific nuclear issues or doesn't really answer any of the 1AR thumper framing about how the issue-specific uniqueness in the status quo and post-dating matters for a lot of the thumper arguments because they've recently made the decision to increase intelligence sharing in the status quo, which means that none of those thumpers assume that the status quo is second, shirking, they'll refuse to implement other priorities in order for them to get their way, which is a piece of 1AR pain evidence. Third is horse trading. Biden will have to buy support back by negotiation and horse trading, especially when we're winning the direction of the link so massively because they made the same arguments that Congress and the outlets would be so overwhelmingly opposed, which forces Biden to horse trade different priorities in exchange for getting in China. And if you pass through Congress, fourth, the sidestepping fiat requires the military to ignore their wishes, and they conceded the link magnitude. It would wreck trust because we have uniqueness that proves Biden's caving to the military now, which is the pain and Trincio evidence. The issue-specific uniqueness was not answered. They're in lockstep now. Thumpers are not about nuclear policy. In all of our evidence, both states are examples. There's no explanation of what disagreement over Ukraine and their part isn't about the wars, but ICC sharing, which is what we read two newer cards on. ILAW is not toothless. It's mostly answered above. Intel sharing is what makes it effective because it means the prosecutions are effective. The miscount defense is not take out the dissent, but probably much higher risk that it takes out the case because there are scenarios about conventional conflicts unintentionally escalating to nuclear use, which if we're right about our thesis that a miscalculated conflict never occurred, then it takes out the scenario, but it doesn't take out our scenario because our scenario is about people also making intentional decisions, the entirety of the terror scenario, and equally accesses all their framing about making intentional decisions to avoid the risk of miscalculation. The advantage counterpoint. I'm not going for the secret plank, and I'm kicking that NFU plank. It's conditional, and they never asked, and only extending strategic stability dialogue because it wasn't answered in the 1AR. It solves the case, prevents a conventional conflict from ever emerging by establishing clear red lines and engaging in confidence-building measures. There's zero 1AR response, which makes this literally unwinnable because the only response was that they've conceded conventional conflict is inevitable, but they have not answered all of our arguments that it doesn't have to be inevitable because engaging strategic stability dialogue solves the reason why it would be inevitable in the status quo. Multiple pieces of evidence corroborate this. The Kong evidence we read says that dialogue alone addresses the concerns that cause miscalculations and misjudgments. It prevents accidents and crisis. It prevents it from becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy. A piece of other Zhao evidence is phenomenal and says it is comparative to an NFU policy and says it solves better than the affirmative because the plan is misperceived as a broader dialogue. And dialogue alone is sufficient to reduce the risk of miscalculation and intentional decisions to escalate to conflict because there's clear red lines over what types of issues would prompt a nuclear response or what types of military policies are perceived as escalatory by other powers. It creates the counterpoint solves better than the AF. China perceives the plan as too narrow to address a concern, which is the piece of of Rustin and the Zhao evidence, which is much better. The theories reason to reject the argument not the team wasn't impacted out. We're kicking the only plank that makes it justified, which also means permutation to the counterpoint of severance, because we're only going for the plank that does strategic stability dialogue and not NFU. Now, the advantage. There's all causes to strategic stability. Benedict and Gomberg conclude that dialogue is a prerequisite to making NFU sufficient to mitigate miscalculation risk. That is damning for the advantage. It proves that counterpoint solves best, and there's no permutation to do both. But you can vote on the counterpoint solving better than the case, especially when they said that conventional conflict is inevitable, and the only scenario for which they prevent it, the only way they solve it is preventing it from escalating to a nuclear use. The counterpoint addresses the core of that concerns by preventing conventional conflict from ever emerging in the first place. Lack of dialogue and conflict building measures means plan is woefully insufficient to address the root causes of conflict and mistrust. There's no China war. One, internal issues overwhelmed. The CCP, legitimacy crises, COVID, real estate swap, etc. are pushing China to focus inward. Even if conventional conflict happens, they'll downplay it to minimize backlash. Second, economic interdependence dissuades interlinkages with supply chains and regional powers like Japan and South Korea means there's no incentive for them to initiate conflict in any hotspot, especially because of economic vulnerability, like the reliance on the Strait of Malacca for oil. That's the Mark and Blackstone evidence. They just asserted that Blackstone's too old without answering any of the warrants or explaining why that matters. China knows they would get immensely sanctioned by every major economy and have every incentive to not initiate conflict. Third, deterrence checks. Wars don't happen on, or actually I want to extend that. The co-location warrant is wrong. It relies on use of loose pressure, which is logical for China to respond to an attack on a co-located system by escalating. If anything, they flush their subs or move mobile missiles to increase survivability, which is a piece of Kronig evidence. No U.S. first strikes. Our evidence is phenomenal. Embedded checks in the National Security Council halt the process and block any illegal first strikes. Illegal evidence needs to do things like comply with the law of armed conflict. There are embedded bureaucrats in every step of the process and multiple veto points, and it would spill out to the public, which they would disincentivize the U.S. U.S. leaders from ever initiating a conflict. The fever evidence is phenomenal and says that embedded bureaucrats within the military would do it. Even assuming that the Trump administration, they're unable to bypass the process that was required for them to actually initiate a first strike. Even assuming that the military wants to get on board, other veto points checked.
Okay, Maggie, can you hear me? Okay, so it's just gonna be the advantage counterplan DA. Okay, and same deal, I've got you pinned, so wave your arms if I cut up. Alright. Everybody good? Okay.
It's charged out to vote affirmative, winning conventional conflict or invasion inevitable means the counterpoint can never solve the app, and it outweighs the DA. One is magnitude. Since the 1DC and DA is conceded that only US-China war goes nuclear, there is zero explanation for how 2 and our DA scenario escalates or is existential comparative to the app. 2 is time frame. This should matter a lot given they're going for a structural impact with no uniqueness, and the 2EC came in the evidence says the war will happen by 2025. 2 and was also conceded 1 year check arguments like intervening actors that slow the process of ICC class, which means it takes way longer than the case. There are a couple of premises that make the countable insolvency impossible for the affirmative. One is that Taiwan war will come now. 2, and our defense is way too contextualized to a generic clash with the SES. This is an existential issue for the United States and the CCP, which means even if we have strategic stability dialogue, that conventional conflict is inevitable. Secondly, is that the U.S. would lose the conventional war. The implications for this will be explained below, but they have zero defense to U.S. conventional weeks in the region, which means we are incredibly reliant on nuclear weapons, even if there is an instance of strategic stability dialogue. Third is that the United States would strike first. All of their defense is about gratuitous total first strike during the era of Trump, but they have not assumed a calculated U.S. rational first strike in the instance of losing a conventional war. The counterpoint cannot stop conventional conflicts. App evidence is embedded denial of that premise, which means that it is impossible for it to solve the app. First, 2 and arguments on the case to be proper are irrelevant. All costs of NFU stability do not matter when the affirmative durably fiats the United States can never use nuclear weapon. First, they have dropped the Chinese NFU is real. They literally do not have the capabilities or tactical nuclear weapons to use nuclear weapon in the region, which means only the app is a scenario for nuclear weapons. First, I'm only going for Taiwan invasion, which means the vast majority of 2 and defense is irrelevant. Taiwan is an existential issue for the CCP. The Zhang evidence says the deterrence might slow their calculus, but it cannot put it off inevitability. Or occasionally evidence says it wars another by 2025 because of leader inevitability. They believe that they are in an existential clash for supremacy in the region, which means that there is a high risk of potential conflict now. The turn inwards argument is uncarded from out the negative. It is an existential issue for the CCP, which means that the populace wants them to go abroad and start wars. Econ does not matter if we're a security instance because the CCP knows they will face regime change if they do not live up to the populace wanting to invade other countries. The cave in the evidence also says that they are obviously not cowed by econ concerns that status quo because the US already has a high risk of sanctions, which are another flashlight for conflict, which turns their defense into offense for the app. Use it or lose it is illogical. It's not a scenario, so this defense doesn't apply. Now, here's the trick of why the counterpoint cannot solve the app. The US would intentionally and rationally use a nuclear weapon first in the instance of losing a conventional conflict. Their first strike defense does not apply. The Sweeney evidence says that audience costs as well as our doctrine of using nuclear weapons in response to non-nuclear attack ensure that the case is huge. LOAC does not apply because of security concerns outweighing. The Sweeney evidence says that leaders are, quote, rational until they are not, which means they would not think about the law of armed conflict in the instance of a conflict. Veto players would be on board with the first strike, which is our Sweeney evidence because commanders do not want to capitulate to China, spill out to the public. Doesn't assume the death of an aircraft carrier, which kills more soldiers than the entirety of Iraq. Now, the counterpoint that cannot solve the strategic stability dialogue solving the case is impossible. It cannot stop conventional conflicts from occurring. When you ask for a card doc, you will note that all of their evidence says that it stops an instance of accidental nuclear war or a miscalculation, but it cannot stop conventional conflicts from occurring. Inevitably, all of our cards are embedded deep into the ability of the counterpoint to solve the app. Miscalculation in a crisis is not the crisis of the app. The clear red lines argument cannot stop U.S. first use because the U.S. would rationally use a nuclear weapon if it uses conventional conflicts. Their evidence are scenarios not predicated on a miscalculation or an accident. So even if we are talking to China in the same breath that we are fucking killing people in Taiwan, it cannot solve the case. The app being able to solve China's concerns is irrelevant because the scenario is only about United States first use, the DA. There is a huge uniqueness question for the ability of the terror impact to outweigh. They have basically dropped the 1 year warrant evidence that said that the warrants of the 1 year evidence that says that terrorists do not have the cash or capability to steal a nuclear weapon now. After COVID, they have to exercise social distancing as well as you have huge economic costs in their organizations because of the cost of the pandemic being able to get things like food or to be able to get things like food or evade detection from national countries, which means that even if they win the terror is existential, there's a nuclear question. But also a question that you should ask yourself is what conflict goes nuclear in the instance of a terror detonation? If they blow up one bomb, they have dropped a couple of premises that should be locked into your decision-making calculus. One is that it cannot trigger an India-Pakistan nuclear war that cause extinction. Secondly is that Russia will never use a nuclear weapon because they are cowed by the fear of U.S. retaliation, which means that there is zero instance in which a terrorist single instance of nuclear detonation can outweigh the large impact of the case, particularly when we have the clear evidence that says that a U.S.-China protracted nuclear exchange is the thing that caused extinction. Chroning evidence says that it results in a strategic exchange between U.S. and China, which outweighs the instance of the DA. The controversy turning crisis stability is irrelevant. Durable fiat from the other counterpoint can be cross-applied here because the app stops the United States from using a nuclear weapon first. China has a durable NFU, which the 200 has no defense to, so they should not get credit for these turns case analysis. We have also conceded your governance defense in the 2EC. Remember when we kicked the advantage and said that this defense applies to the DA? The ICC cannot solve nebulous conflict or terrorism elsewhere because institutions will fill in for governance decline elsewhere. They've read generic LIO defense that applies to an ICC, even if they are a specific instance of conflict initiation. We have defense to their scenario as well. Our evidence is from the leading experts, and it says that from Amnesty International, who says that the ICC is toothless. There is no international cooperation to be able to solve things. If it does, would have stopped the Palestine invasion or any other genocide occurring internationally. no international law has no ability to solve this country, especially if we win our arguments on the case page about security outweighing the legitimacy of international institutions. They might have evidence that says that the ICC is aspirationally legitimate and that those norms can constrain states, but there is zero instance that it will outweigh the case, particularly when the case is probably a crunch DA to the DA overview because the conventional conflict would make global war and terrorism inevitable. The first argument I will extend is spillover. Drop down to this portion of the flow. 0 2-and-R words on this. They have been way too shoddy on the link debate and the 2-and-R. Even if the plan is controversial, our relationships are resilient. Our evidence is the best in this debate, and it says that the relationship is rock solid. Austin is firmly standing behind Biden, which means that he speaks for the entirety of the military when he talks about controversies of, yeah, even if there was smoke and mirrors, all of our thumper evidence bolster the spillover evidence, because even if we are talking to Russia about the ICC now, those things do not matter if in the past we have fought over Ukraine, Afghanistan, military generals who are against the United States policy generally of withdrawing from the region. If they were able to recover from those, they will be able to recover from the DA. Their DA scenario is not the United States and Russia would crush ICC collaboration, but rather they must win a prior internal link if the military disagree with Biden, which our spillover evidence gives us fantastic internal link defense too. The last argument I will extend is the couple of uniqueness arguments. First is that we have evidence that says that Ukraine is a recent issue for the military being concerned with Biden's policy. The post-state argument is a sham because it still says the military leaders were pissed over the issue, and if they win the threshold argument that the uniqueness numbers cannot trump the DA, it means that the relations inevitably structural and sound should rate that should be like it inflates the value of our defense the more they respond to our thumpers. 2-and-R is way too light on no spillover. It's huge defense to the DA. Great debate.
Great debate.
Just come here first before you make your shit.
Like a